It is now time for Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now, here he is, the man who is the unofficial fifth member of the Truth Commission, Bill Chase. Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer. And yes, indeed, this is Diary of a Wrestling Fan, the podcast that chronicles my 33 amazing years being a fan of professional wrestling. I am Bill Chase, of course, and thank you all to last week who listened to the Daniel Bryan podcast. That got a lot of views, what am I saying, streams. Sorry, YouTube is actually the one place where my show doesn't do very well. I'll get to that in a second, but thank you for listening on Anchor, Spotify, wherever podcasts are streamed. Either way, if you tuned in, I am happy. Also, if you are listening on YouTube, please subscribe because really, again, nobody really listens to this podcast on YouTube. So again, if by chance you do, please subscribe. Hit that subscribe button right now. And a great episode for you today. We're going to be chronicling one of the most talked about feuds and matches of the last 20 years, Hulk Hogan and Shawn Michaels. Now, that was a storied feud to say the least. Two icons, but again, the story all behind it and obviously what went on backstage is just as interesting and whatnot. Mainly my perspective, of course, is from this as a fan, but of course I learned a lot about what had happened later on. So before we get to that, however, I do need to give a quick shout out to Pro Wrestling Ontario. After this podcast is over, you can click the link right above in the video. If you're listening on YouTube, on the video, click the link above. Subscribe to Pro Wrestling Ontario as well. We got matches, we got promos. We got the backstage shenanigans, a foundation. We got complete shows. That's right. It's all there on Pro Wrestling Ontario's YouTube channel. And follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and give us a like on Facebook. We are everywhere. Check us out. We got some stuff coming up right around the corner, so stay tuned. All right, we're going to get down to it. Again, Hulk Hogan and Shawn Michaels. Again, that feud took center stage in the summer of 2005. Can't believe it's been 15 years since SummerSlam 2005 took place. The match between these two, of course, the big headliner. Obviously, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but I must say that this show, I mean, obviously, they had a lot of other marquee matches as well, but this show did draw a monster number on pay-per-view buys. From what my research tells me, 650,000 buys. Is the second most bought SummerSlam of all time, only second to SummerSlam 1998. So obviously the Hogan-Michaels match had a lot to do with that, I would assume. And of course the arena was sold out. Just a big night for wrestling, a lot of money drawn there, and hey, that's what it's all about. And people can say what they want about Shawn Michaels, but it's all business when it comes down to it, especially in the latter part of his career. That's what he was primarily concerned about more than anything. All right. So to set up the story here. Now I remember in 2005, the spring of 2005, I thought wrestling had a lot of positive things happening. Now, a lot of people might disagree, but really, if you think about it, in the world of wrestling, you had TNA. They were really hitting a stride with their alternative product. And yes, there will be episodes about TNA pay-per-views I will be doing in the future. But also, I have to say that with the WWE, John Cena and Batista had just become the guys. They had just become the guys that spring. At WrestleMania that year, both winning their first championships in the same night. It was an era that people may frown on as the PG era, but really, logically, they were the guys you had to go with. They were the ones, the baby faces that were giving the biggest reactions. They were the ones that the fans rallied behind leading up to WrestleMania. And you know what? Clearly, Vince McMahon and company saw that, and the rest is, as they say, is history. At that time, you also had some good stuff happening with some new novel concepts coming in. Money in the Bank had just debuted at that WrestleMania, Edge winning the first one. You had the Undertaker engaged in a really interesting feud with Randy Orton, actually. So there was a lot of good stuff happening in the wrestling world at this point. And you know what? I gotta say, it was a lot of fun. The 2005 era. It's just like people go on about, the Attitude Era. And again, I'm not going to criticize anyone who loved the Attitude Era. God, I did. Of course I did. I was in high school and all this great, amazing, crazy, zany stuff was happening week after week on Raw. But it is true that sometimes wrestling has bad periods, wrestling has good periods. It's been dating that way, dating back to the territories, I should say. Sorry, dating back to the territories. That's how it's always been. There's peaks and valleys. There's good draws. There's bad draws. There's things that look good on paper, but they don't. It doesn't always work out well in execution. And that's just how wrestling has always been. And the WWE is no different from that. They are not immune to it. But again, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be making money. Or I should say 99 times out of 100, or maybe even 999,999 times out of a million, they'll be making money. That'd probably be a better analogy. But either way, I also want to say, too, that Cena and Batista, I was not a diehard fan of either of them. Like, I didn't buy their T-shirts, stuff like that. Is what I'm trying to say. But even I knew as a fan, just simply as a fan, that it made sense for them to be, at the spots where they were. And I enjoyed them. Again, just because I wasn't, I guess, for lack of a better term, a mark for them that way, I did enjoy them. They delivered. They were delivering at this time. Batista was put over strong by Triple H 3 times in a row, 3 shows in a row, including WrestleMania, blowing off in a really good Hell in a Cell match. And Cena at this point was actually in a pretty entertaining feud with JBL. Now, again, the JBL character has always been hit or miss for me. The guy could get amazing heat. But at this point, JBL and Cena, I thought they always clicked pretty well. The WrestleMania match, I guess people didn't like. But the match they had at Judgment Day, that I Quit match, was awesome. Like, that was a really freaking great match. So, yeah, there's that. Yeah, my whole thing was, as long as Cena and Batista were in engaging feuds and matches, much like probably any other fan, I'd enjoy it. And at this point, I was enjoying both their title runs, to be honest. And also something else big happened at this time. Shawn Michaels had an incredible match at WrestleMania with Kurt Angle. It was one of the best matches in WrestleMania history. I think I even put it only second to Bret Hart and Steve Austin from WrestleMania 13, if I'm just going over my own personal list. I think it's easily in a lot of people's top 5 of WrestleMania matches of all time. Michaels and Angle had mad chemistry. I mean, finding chemistry with Shawn Michaels, if you're up to the task, is as easy as picking up your phone and clearing notifications. I mean, that's, again, if anybody's up to the task, you're going to have good chemistry with Shawn, and it's going to turn out amazing, and that's what that did. And also something else happened that weekend. WrestleMania weekend, Hulk Hogan was inducted into the Hall of Fame. Hogan had not really had much of a relationship with the company at that point since 2003, after the Mr. America thing. Hogan left the company, I think, early that summer, and he hadn't been around since. There was a lot of rumors going around about what he was going to do, where he was going to be, and again, like the TNA rumors popped up, and Japan, like stuff like that. Hogan was, again, a lot of things were happening, but he always comes back, it seems, even if it's after a long absence or a short one like this one. He came back in 2005 for the Hall of Fame induction, and again, it was just a good time. It was really, I was 22 years old at this point. I just turned 22 shortly before WrestleMania 21, and things were off and running, I think, for the WWE at this point. So Hogan and Shawn teamed up at Backlash that year, and because Shawn was a victim of an attack between Daivari and Muhammad Hassan. He demanded a match, and Hogan, at his Hall of Fame speech, when finishing one more match or whatever, he just said, "Never say never." That's all he said. Hogan and Michaels teamed up to face Daivari and Hassan when Michaels had asked Hogan to be his partner. And, of course, the two iconic baby faces won. Even after Hogan and Michaels won that match, it didn't even occur to me that the two of them would be building into a rivalry. For some reason, despite my jadedness at this point at times, it didn't occur to me that they would actually engage in a match. I just figured this was a good one-off for Hogan, Because again, he hadn't wrestled much in the last couple of years, and I don't know. I thought this might have been it. And then what was it? It was a Raw in early July, where Hogan made an appearance and was attacked by Carlito and Kurt Angle on the Carlitos Cabana segment, and Michaels made the save. Made perfect sense. Michaels makes the save, and then they have the big main event match. Hogan and Michaels, of course, win. And then a split second before the super kick happened, I'm like, wait, somebody's going to do something here. And as soon as I said that, boom, there it was. I didn't expect maybe that exactly to be what happened. I just remember that visual of Shawn looking down at Hogan, the commentary completely silent. Now, sometimes I don't like the fact that the commentary is silent during segments like this. But this is one of the times where it was appropriate because it was supposed to be sold as absolutely shocking. See me, I'm a believer in selling the situation in a big way, but there are occasions where the silence works, and this was actually one of them. So as the show ended, as the show went off the air with Shawn still looking down at an unconscious Hulk Hogan, Michaels challenged Hogan to a match. Hogan obviously later accepted. And man, we were set. We were in motion for what's said to be an epic match between two icons. Now, I look forward to any match of this magnitude with two legends, regardless of if I'm a huge fan of them or not. Now, Shawn Michaels, I found myself cheering against him a lot. Maybe this is still the whole Bret Hart thing. I don't know. There's a lot of times I cheer for him as well. You know what I mean? There's a lot of times I was behind him. But again, I was a big Hogan kid growing up, and you know what? This time, I was kind of like, I don't know, do I really want to cheer Hogan this time? Like, maybe Shawn, maybe I want Shawn. I didn't know. I was looking forward to it. So, for the next couple of weeks, Shawn went on super kicking a couple more legends, Piper, I think Lawler. And he was carrying the build-up all on his own. Not a bad thing necessarily. Why? Because he's more than capable of doing it, for one. And for another, if Hogan can't be there every week, well, somebody's got to do it. So, Shawn tells a story in great detail about this whole situation on his My Journey DVD. It's just a grab. It's a fantastic find. And he had told this story that, you know, Vince and Creative, they wanted the Shawn from 1997. And any wrestling historian or anyone who's not even a historian, I actually overstated that, any wrestling fan who was watching back then knows the kind of heat and the kind of instigation that Shawn Michaels could really get out of the crowd. He could really instigate them into just near riots at times. And he said, well, that's what you want. You're going to get it. And boy, did we get it. And I'm so glad we did. Why? Shawn never got stale. I mean, the fact his ring performances alone kept him fresh, no matter what had happened. And I like the fact that he still, despite the fact that he hadn't been a heel for quite some time, was still able to tap in to that aspect of himself because he had been such a beloved babyface since returning in 2002, almost 3 years. Now, I'm not saying, of course, I'm not saying he'd forget how to play a heel, but it's just amazing how he eased back into that role so well. Now, some would say Shawn was more a tweener in this feud. Well, clearly I think they established him as more of the heel, but he didn't exactly denounce his fans or didn't, other than the stuff he was spouting towards Hogan, wasn't really playing up the heel persona that way. He was a heel on Hogan, and that was about it. And Hogan's fans, maybe, but Really, but still, some of the promos he was cutting was like 1997 Shawn. And I'll get to the big one, and you all know what I'm talking about in just a little bit. Now, at this point, rumors had started also swirling about a man, of course, who has history with Shawn Michaels. That, of course, Bret the Hitman Hart. Bret, around this time, would agree to be a part of the production of this DVD chronicling his career, plus, of course, other DVDs featuring many of his great matches that he's had over the course of his career. So the rumors even started swirling more, saying how, wonder if he's going to get involved. And it's true, they did. And you know what? The WWE, they did not ignore those rumors. And I'll get to that, that's for sure. Again, Michaels' obnoxiousness, though, in this feud was superb. Now, everybody remembers two specific segments. But the one that does get overlooked is their face-to-face confrontation they had on Raw, where Bret Hart was referenced by Hogan, which was almost kind of strange to the fact that Bret doesn't like Hogan, and it was already well known at this point that he didn't. And Shawn's smug look during this entire segment just cracks me up every time. And I remember despising 1997 Shawn Michaels, but that didn't mean I wasn't thoroughly entertained by him either. To be honest with you, I didn't really truly despise Shawn until the screw job happened. Oh yes, just to remind you all, there will be an episode on that. 2 parts. But the way just he carried himself and the way he's carrying this feud truly is a testament to his skill as a performer. We all know how great in the ring he is. That goes without saying. But again, you're carrying a main event feud, a dream match build up. And look, when Hogan was there, he did his part, whatever. That was what it was. It's not as if I know it sounds like I'm being dismissive of Hogan, but really, to me, it's factual that Shawn carried this feud and gave it that enticing feeling. So then we're going to now zero in on the 2 segments that everyone remembers. Of course, there was the Shawn Michaels impersonation of Hulk Hogan on Larry King Live. That was some good stuff. It was over the top, but again, even over the top can be done right. And Michaels is the type of guy that can do that right. We've seen how over the top he could be again in 97 with DX. And he managed that here, but again, despite being over the top, he was still getting those jabs in on Hogan. And the whole feud was being based around a couple certain things. One, Shawn Michaels going out there and performing every single night, being the best, and trying to test Hogan's mortality as a legend, because Michaels felt at this point, at least that's how I interpreted it, that he was the bigger legend, the fact that he could bring the house down every night, where it seemed that he was resentful of Hogan because Hogan had built such a great legacy by doing very little, by not performing in the smaller towns. And Shawn felt that he could make Hogan, well, mortal again. He felt that he could beat the best. It made perfect sense. Shawn resented Hogan for many things, and you know what? Those things were valid from his end, from a character standpoint. The Larry King segment, again, it's hilarious. Like, I can still laugh when he enters on the walker and almost falls, or the back cramp segment, or the super kick to Larry King, where then Shawn finally, after being over the top for a few minutes and being comedic, he gets serious. So that again, it was handled with such greatness from Shawn Michaels. This segment, you have to check. I can't do it justice. You have to check it out for yourself. Yes, it was played up for comedy, but it also sold the feud. So after that, of course, the Go Home Raw. And again, you all know where I'm going with this. How fitting is it in one of the biggest headlining matches of Shawn's career that the Go Home show for SummerSlam, the Go Home Raw, I should specify, is in Montreal. And oh yes, a lot of you already know what I'm talking about. Again, I'm gonna obviously go over this in long form. The Montreal Screwjob, Bret Hart, was screwed over by Vince McMahon. Shawn Michaels was in the match with him. It was a match between Bret and Shawn. Vince screwed him over. Shawn was in on it, so pretending he wasn't for many years. And Montreal and all of Canada pretty much despised Shawn Michaels from there on in. Of course, he's got what they call nuclear heat in Montreal. And I'm probably paraphrasing here, but that line gets on the mic as the city of Montreal is booing him out of the building. Montreal, who's your daddy? Like, so right then and there, he's just off to the races. And cuts a fantastic promo again. I can't do it justice, but the heat he is getting in this promo is magnificent. And to top it off, Bret Hart's music hits. Now again, Bret at this point had agreed to do the DVD, like I mentioned earlier. So he had an association again with WWE. As loose as it may have been, he was still associating with them for the first time in close to 8 years. And the place it was one of the biggest pops you ever heard for a wrestler that never entered the building. Shawn had that worried look on his face, and of course it was all a ruse. Just brilliant, just brilliant. And he does it again with Hogan later, even though the reaction's still loud, not quite the same, but he's still goading the crowd into booing him even more, putting even more heat on him. And then at the end of the show, again, it sets it up perfectly. He puts Hogan in the sharpshooter. And I, as a fan, now want Shawn to lose. Remember, I was torn at first? I want Shawn to lose now. I was watching that segment at my parents' place. I was still living there at the time on Naples Boulevard. And I was ready for it. I was ready for SummerSlam. I was ready to see Hogan and Michaels because I'm like, it's the first time ever. I love dream matches. Again, that's a big thing I mark out for, dream matches, especially with guys I grew up watching. These two are definitely fitting in that category, of course. And I still in the back of my head thinking Bret Hart might show up. I was hoping. So then came SummerSlam. I remember I watched this at QB Sports in Burlington. It's a sports bar. I was there with my friend Kyle McCluskey, who I mentioned a bit in my King of the Ring podcast. That's episode 2 in the archives. I believe, was there with my friend Sarah at the time. I think it was just the three of us. At this point, my good friends Jeff Taylor and John Forjak was kind of growing apart from them. We're growing apart from each other in that way. And they had kind of distanced themselves from wrestling as a whole. And that's fine. It happens. But what I hated at the time was they were distancing themselves from me as a whole. Thinking, quote, I was holding them back from enjoying life. And that they needed to make certain changes. They would hang out together and lie to me about it without calling me. I would find out about it. Then they'd have some stupid excuse saying, oh, we just need a break from you for once in a while. And, again, that stuff did hurt. It hurt. I was going through a time where I was questioning a lot of friendships. Again, I'm only 22 at this point. I was still going to church quite a bit. I was so close friends with Adam. Adam, one of my good friends, Adam Powell, and Mike Ayotte. And you know what? Those guys were not wrestling fans. As a matter of fact, they made fun of me constantly for it. They poked fun at the fact that I was so passionate about it. They poked fun at the fact that I was such a diehard for wrestling, and there were times they did make me feel bad about it, or at least, they made not. I guess that's the wrong term. They made me feel like a certain way. They made me feel a certain way that it just made me feel dejected. Times. I know at times they were kidding, but there are times they take it a little too far and then they get serious. However, another good friend at that church, Dan Piper, I had he already liked a bit of wrestling at that point, but I helped get him into it a little more. And Dan was the definition of a good guy. And you know what? So he was never that way. Even if he was poking fun at me about something, he never did it in a mean-spirited way. He'd actually do it in a funny way. And again, he was a true good guy, one of the best guys I've ever known in my life. And we started enjoying wrestling in that together. I was always hoping to get him to come out for pay-per-views. The problem is he was such a devoted Christian. I'm not saying that condescendingly. He really, really was. And so he was at church in the evenings. So I used to I skipped church in the evenings to watch pay-per-views usually, which again, I was criticized for heavily. So I'm watching a pay-per-view at QB Sports in Burlington. We have a booth, and I'm looking forward to this. Now, I'll obviously maybe do a separate show on it in the future. Maybe talk about it, and because I want to talk about the Matt Hardy Edge feud on an episode later too. But SummerSlam 2005 was actually a really good show, from what I can recall. Again, the Matt Hardy Edge feud was red hot at that point. Benoit squashing Orlando Jordan was amusing. Granted, the Rey Mysterio Eddie Guerrero storyline was what it was about the custody of Dominic. But you know what? Those two committed to it. Okay, and by this payoff, the crowd was invested. So they did something right. Randy Orton evened up at 1-1 with The Undertaker after losing at WrestleMania. Cena beat Jericho. Batista just dominated JBL. So the show had its highlights for sure. And then, of course, they saved Hogan and Michaels for last. No big surprise there. So what we learned later on is that Hogan and Michaels was supposed to be a 3-match series, with the two of them winning a match apiece, and then the rubber match. Hogan, however, felt he should win all 3. That don't work for me, brother. So basically, we had WCW Hogan for this whole scenario. Now, crazy thing. That's the crazy thing. We had Hogan acting like WCW Hogan, at least backstage anyway, and Shawn Michaels acting like 1997 Shawn Michaels, both around the same era here. Now, Shawn, despite his promos, however, was apparently grateful to be in the ring with Hogan. At least he would say that later. He was grateful to have this opportunity to build up to this match and, do really well with it and see what he can do with it. And that's another thing people are looking forward to too. Would Shawn be able to get like a really good match out of Hogan? So as we're getting ready for the match too, again, like I said, I'm watching this at QB Sports. I've been reading online. I was telling this to Kyle too. I said, there's been a lot of rumors. Apparently Hogan's not happy with some of the stuff Shawn's been saying in his promos about him. He's, I guess, a little pissed off. Apparently he was okay with everything, I guess, and then that was it. Like, it was apparently his Hulk was not happy with the way things were going, and that seems to be a big thing with Hulk. If he's not happy about something, then, well, he's not going to do the business that others want him to do. And again, like I said, I'm a Hulk Hogan fan above all. Like, again, I am a Hulk Hogan fan. But obviously, there have been so many stories that have come out about him in all these years, on these recent years. It's more so connected to how he was. Like, again, I find a pattern. When people talk about Hogan burying them or holding them back, like in the 80s or 90s, to me, it just comes off as bitterness. Whereas a lot of guys, and this is, again, that's a minority group, though, however. That's a very minority group. The majority, however, of people who wrestled in the 80s with Hogan liked him, and they liked working the cards with him because they knew they were going to make some money, even if they weren't exactly like wrestling him in the main. Being on the same show with him, a lot of them had said that, well, we're going to make some money. It wasn't really until Bret Hart in 1993 had that big gripe. But again, looking at all sides of that story, even including Hogan's, I kind of agree with Brett's assessment that he was kind of put in between a game of politics between Vince and Hogan and just found himself right smack dab in the middle. Yeah. So that's possible with Hogan standing with the company at that point. It's very much possible that Brett got caught in between a game. I mean, it's not impossible at all. So it wasn't really until that point, at least the research I've done, thinking that Hogan had that kind of attitude towards him. To me, the negative stories about his politics and backstage power didn't really come to the surface until his time in WCW. So I can understand that much, at least. Like, I've heard a lot of main event wrestlers say how they need to protect their brand, they need to make sure they're making money, and that's obviously understandable. But yet, I think a 3-match series with Hogan and Michaels, especially there was one, I don't know how true this rumor is, there was a rumor to be a cage match, which would make sense. I would think that a Hogan Michaels series would have to stay a little fresh with like a stipulation match, and I think a cage match would actually be perfect. If that is true, then I think that would be the right payoff. They each win one match, each win a straight one-on-one match, have the payoff being a cage match. And Shawn Michaels' attitude at this point, despite the fact that his character was acting like 1997 Shawn, he was still, as a person, 2005 Shawn. I'm sure even if he had lost the payoff match, that he wouldn't have minded that. I'm just willing to guess. I'm guessing here, but judging by Shawn's attitude in this era, I don't think he would have thrown a fit about putting over Hogan in the third match. But Hogan wanted to win all three, apparently. That's what the story, as a story goes from some, including Shawn. And so they just had one instead. It was going to be here at SummerSlam. So I am in deep anticipation for this match. Now I'm there. I finished my food by this point. I'm looking at Kyle and I'm just like, here we go. He could tell I was psyched for this. And I'm like looking at the screen intently. I'm actually wearing my Hulkamania shirt. There were a few people in the bar that night wearing the Hulkamania shirt. There was a large crowd at the bar. So the last couple of pay-per-views have actually had poor crowds at QB Sports because they were showing pay-per-views monthly. This was a large crowd on hand for this one. I think also too because it was SummerSlam as a whole. And a lot of kids were there wearing their Cena and Batista shirts because this was an all-ages event. So they were ready for this. So I'm watching this match. And right off the opening bell, Shawn is selling like mad. He is bouncing around more than an orange rubber ball that you would get out of a gumball machine. And both right away, Kyle and I actually look at each other. Now, Kyle was a wrestling fan, was a very big wrestling fan. And he wasn't as passionate about it as I was. And I'm not saying that as a knock on him. He'll be the first to tell you that. He knew something was up. He's like, what was that? I'm just thinking, I don't know. So as we're watching the match and we're watching Shawn bounce around, and I'm thinking, I've read these rumors now for a couple of weeks, and I'm looking at Kyle like, do you think he's doing this on purpose? And Kyle said, perhaps. He said, he's like, it would make perfect sense if Shawn's pissed off at Hogan's backstage whining, if all that's true. So as we're watching the match, now again, unpopular viewpoint. I like this match. I did. You know what? Shawn was trying to do the thing where, in a way, people would always like oversell for Hogan at times. And hey, I was told even by my trainer, overselling is better than underselling. But it's almost as if Shawn was proving a point here about his skill level as a performer compared to Hogan's. Obviously, I would have to think Shawn was not happy with the way things had gone down. There have been people, again, Shawn's alluded to this himself, that he was trying to be like 1997 Shawn in this match. Now, 1997 Shawn did exaggerate a lot. He did oversell, but I watched a lot of those moments, and yet despite his overselling back then, he wasn't. It just didn't seem like he was trying to make anyone look bad. I'm not saying that was. I guess we'll never fully know if he was trying to make Hogan look like a fool here, or just kind of make a statement saying, "Oh, you want me to sell for Hogan? Fine, I'll sell for Hogan." I don't know. I'm not in Shawn's brain. To me, this was still a little more over the top than his 1997 selling. Just a little bit more. To me, there was still a way where it was believable in 97. Here, it was just crazy. But I still enjoyed this match. It actually still told a really good story overall. And Hogan did fine. Hogan was obviously having he has a lot of knee and hip issues, which are plaguing him right to this day now, obviously, as he's gotten older, as he's pushing 70. At this point, Hulk's just turned 52. So even Hulk was trying to bring it. I got to give him credit there. And it's, like I said, it's still told an overall good story, regardless of what Shawn's motives were or not, whether they were good or bad, or whether he was really trying to be like 1997 Shawn in the ring as well, besides on the microphone. Again, the heat this match had, the crowd was right into it. When the crowd chanted, "We want Brett," because again, people were hoping Brett would show up. There were rumors about Brett showing up. And those are just cheap rumors. There wasn't really a lot of validity to them, but be that as it may, we were all hoping. I was hoping. So Shawn kind of glares at the crowd. I remember it was a great spot. He looks around and said, "You want Brett?" And goes in the ring, gets Hogan the sharpshooter, and that pissed off everyone. I have to say, like, again, Brett has criticized a lot of people the way they put out the sharpshooter on. Shawn has done it okay at times. He's actually done it pretty good. He does it on Hogan. The crowd is livid. They're waiting for Brett to come out. Obviously, he doesn't. And the sell of the boot, though, again, people that remember that famous gift, the sell of the, I don't know, that's how you pronounce it, whatever. Sell of the boot, just the way Shawn did it was unbelievable. To me, again, like I said, regardless of the motives, it made the match all that more memorable. Hogan hit the big leg, got the win. Hogan was bloody this whole. I forgot to say Hogan bladed in this match, big time. He was wearing that crimson mask. It added a little extra to it, and Hogan got the win. Shawn shook his hand, saying all he said was, "I had to know," and that was it. Well, actually, no, wait, that wasn't it. The next night on Raw, Shawn comes on. Now, again, I'm watching Raw now with my buddy Tom. Well, actually, I'm jumping the gun here a bit. So, big moment here for me at QB Sports as the show ends. I meet two wrestling fans who would later become good friends of mine at that time. I met my friend Heather and her group of friends because we would kind of like during these. I gotta paint a picture. So during these like a pay-per-view gatherings at the bars, you interact with other people at tables. Kind of, you hear them say comment. It's not eavesdropping. You can obviously hear them they're within earshot. You'll respond to them, and that's what we do there. And we did that all night with her table. So I met her and her friends. That was really cool. Heather would become a pretty good friend of mine for the next few years. And after the Undertaker-Randy Orton match, I ran into a guy who I referred to as Taker Clone. Because he was like, he wasn't a complete clone, obviously. He was like almost like Taker's mini-me. He had long red hair. There's like long wavy red hair, red goatee, lots of tattoos, looked like a biker. Actually had a leather vest, so there you go. And we're lining up, because there was actually a lineup in the men's room. It's a wrestling pay-per-view. It's going to be primarily men. We're lining up, and he just looks at me at the Undertaker Orton match. He's wearing his one of his Undertaker shirts. Like, so what'd you think of the match? Him and I have always seen each other there. I had seen him there for a better part of a year. And we talked about it a little bit while we're waiting in line. And I said, that was a bit of a surprise with Bob Orton there. I didn't think he'd interfere again, and stuff like that. So after that, the man's name is Paul Cellini, and he became a very good friend of mine for the next better part of a decade, actually. I later found out he's a musician in a band, a drummer. He's actually been a professional musician, has done session work in Nashville and Los Angeles. he and I became really good friends because not only in wrestling we had a lot in common, but we had a lot in common on things like in entertainment, music. Even when we didn't, we'd have spirited discussions about them, and it was always fun. So I met two people who become very good friends of mine. So that was a big night for me as well in that regard. I almost forgot about that. So the next day, so I'll get to that. We were watching Raw at my buddy Tom Themelis's place. I mentioned Tom a lot in my episode 2, King of the Ring, 2001. Tom, very overhyped, but at this point, he's losing interest in wrestling. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about friendships in these podcasts because that's part of the bond that I have. All these people wrestling was a big part of it. So we're watching Raw at Tom's. Shawn cuts a promo, sarcastically, again, I'm paraphrasing here, but sarcastically saying, I fell to the mighty big boot and a big leg drop, and now I fell to Hulkamania. Now kind of back to reality kind of thing. Shawn was totally condescending, and I don't want to say buried Hulk, but it was close to it. But in a way, I'm like, Shawn was, despite that I was cheering for Hulk in that match because I watched the Raw Go Home show in Montreal, I was back on his side again. He was the heel. The heel thing was done. He was feuding with Chris Masters literally minutes later. There you go. That was it. And another big reason that Raw was a big thing, again, Tom. Tom Themelis had been a good friend of mine at this point for a better part of 5 years. We had a bit of a falling out in late 2002, I want to say, for several months. And we didn't reunite again until early 2003. And then we stayed friends after that. We still became close friends again. That was largely thanks to Kyle. Kyle kind of helped with that in a lot of ways. And that we watched the Raw that night. We all got together at his house. Again, it was still summer. I left this house and didn't hear from him for nearly 3 years. For whatever reason, Tom distanced himself from most of us. Not all of us, but most of us. He would later reunite with Jeff and John, who at this point I wasn't talking to either, around 2008 or so. When I ran into Tom at the mall, we actually had a discussion, and yeah, it was 2008 I saw him again. We had a nice talk in the food court, and again, didn't hear from him for another 2 years. So then, 2010, I reunited with all of them, Don, Jeff, and John. I'll get to that in another podcast. So again, as my friendships were changing in a big way. And you know what? Some of it I regret, some of it I don't. I don't regret meeting Paul or Heather. They became, again, like I said, really close friends. Didn't talk to Paul for a few years recently. Started talking to him again not long ago. Had a little interaction with Heather not too long ago either. Again, we didn't talk for quite a few years actually. And again, we didn't have a falling out. We just lost communication and lives went in different directions. It happens. You know what I mean? I think that's the thing with Tom too. It's just Tom and I were so close. The thing with Paul and Heather, it was gradual. But again, I was watching Raw at Tom's place that night. I was still hanging out with Tom on a consistent basis. He was losing interest for wrestling. And I'm sad to say, I think because he was losing interest in it, that he thought because I was so passionate about it that our friendship wasn't going to be the same. Maybe. I don't know. That might have been his mindset. I don't know. I'd have to ask him that one day. Because I haven't seen Tom much since he's been married. But at the same time, though, it's just like maybe it is very possible. Oh, wow, this has been quite a trip down memory lane. I'm veering off topic a little bit. I do like to bring up, obviously, my bonds and friendships with people I enjoyed wrestling with over these years, but, I can't always get too detailed, I guess, but I guess I did today, so sorry about that. But either way, I've been thinking a lot about my old friends lately, and that's probably why I brought it up today. And you'll hear me talk about more of them on future podcasts. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Diary of a Wrestling Fan. Next week, we'll actually be talking about the first time I saw WrestleMania 3. And I'll give you a quick spoiler here. It wasn't when it happened. It wasn't until years later when I finally rented it on VHS and watched the whole show. That's going to be an exciting one, too. Experiencing one of the biggest cards in the history of professional wrestling years later on videotape in my room in an attic. It's going to be interesting. Well, thank you all once again for tuning in. I know there's a few points here I was a little off today, but thank you for bearing with me. So until next time, subscribe. You're on YouTube. If you're listening on Anchor or Spotify, follow this podcast, please, and thank you. Or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. So until then, quote a wise Hamiltonian, when I'm telling you all, this is Bill Chase saying, don't you dare miss it! Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. If you'd like to make a contribution to the show, just sign Bill's online petition to have Steve Blackman inducted into the Hall of Fame.